Hello and welcome back to Politically Awake. Before I start, if you are new, please consider subscribing and leaving a like on this video. I'm almost at 250 subscribers, so it would be appreciated if you help me get to that goal. Now, today I'm going to be doing a House prediction for the 2022 November midterms. I'll predict each open seat, and then we will see at the end of the day what I think the House map will likely look like for Democrats and Republicans. So I'm going to quickly just speak on this. I'm going to take into account the Real Clear Politics polling averages, as well as a few other polls like Rasmussen, and talk about some of the polls that are more accurate, some of them that are less accurate generally, and see who will likely actually win and how the Republicans are actually doing. So overall, as you can see, Republicans do have a tie/lead in the RCP. RCP is more accurate than 538's polling averages. They're still not amazing, but it's more accurate than 538, so I'll generally be taking them into account. Although I do have many issues with a lot of the polls they still count, because a lot of them are registered voting polls. Registered voting polls, I've gone over this in the past, or at least mentioned it. They're not accurate. They're much less accurate than likely voter polls, and they also underestimate Republicans consistently. Republicans tend to do much better in the likely voter polls because they're more accurate polls in general, and most polls underestimate Republicans by a few point margins. And right now, I have seen that the Republicans are leading the likely voter polls averaged out by about 4-ish or 5 points, while the Democrats lead the registered by 2. That is generally a very good measure for Republicans, and it is a good sign going into the House and Senate elections in the midterms, as well as the governor elections. It's also a reason why the polls are just so inaccurate, and why the red wave will continue to grow and will be quite big, despite what some of these polls might claim. So, another one to consider, actually, I'd say one of the more accurate ones, is a Rasmussen generic poll that has Republicans ahead by 5 over the Democrats, which is a very large margin. And again, they use the likely voter poll method, which is why it is more accurate, and it's why it's a poll I actually trust. So we're going to take that into account, as well as the national environment in the 2020 election, which had a lot of these seats. If we look here, showing their margins, these margins are not necessarily going to be sustained. They're not normally that high. That's really just a result of how far the Democrat environment was. The national environment was like a D plus 4 or 5, I believe, maybe more. I'm not entirely sure. It was a very favorable year for Republicans with the COVID scam they used to replace Trump and remove him from office, as well as many other scams. Nonetheless, that is something to consider here when we look at this. And right now, I'd predict the general national environment, I'd say, is around 4 points for Republicans. Trump was actually had a higher approval than Biden did by the midterms. So I really don't see a world where Republicans don't generally pick up a fair bit in the House and the Senate. That's why I stand by my predictions, and why I think a lot of the polls are also so very inaccurate. And then the Democrats, who are trying to make it seem like, oh, we're still going to win. You're wrong. You're wrong. I'm sorry. You're not going to win. There's no chance. So considering that, and I'd say probably a R+4 national environment, we can go through each state and see what the likely House results will be. Starting off, we have Alabama. There's nothing in Alabama. Alaska. So this one was interesting. This was the Peltola Palin Begich race, as you can see here. Peltola won it in the recent special election, but ranked choice voting was the reason for that. Ranked choice voting is ridiculous. Republicans actually outvoted them, but again, Palin's not the most popular candidate there either. So that had issues, but I do think by this election, realistically, Republicans will unite behind one of the candidates, and they will take out Peltola probably by I'd say, likely margin. Realistically, I do think it shouldn't be a competitive race. I do think Republicans win it, and it will be in a lean to likely margin. It's a state that Trump won by around 10 points, as you can see in 2020, and the environment will be further to the right. So I do think overall it would be in a likely, potentially even safe margin, assuming the trends continue. Now, moving on to Arizona, we have a few seats here. A few seats that are open for the to grab, I guess. So we have, first off, we have Arizona's one, Schweikert. Schweikert, I do think he wins it, probably in a lean or a likely margin. Again, it was a good national environment. I think that likely would have been a Republican, a more Republican, and actually it would have gone for Trump in an actual in this current environment, the current Republican environment. I do think this would be a likely for Schweikert. I think Republicans win that seat, as well as Arizona second. This one easily. I'd even put it as safe. The consensus is wrong in this case. I easily would put that as safe. Tom O'Halloran will not win it. We also have Arizona's fourth. This one, Democrats probably will win. I'd say in a likely margin. It won't be that far. Kelly Cooper could get it closer over Greg Stanton, but I don't think she wins it. And then there's also this seat held by a Democrat as well, the sixth. It only went 0.3 for Biden in the 2020. It's not a very, it won't go that far. It'll probably, I would tend to agree with the consensus. I do think it would be a lean margin for Juan Kisamani. Now, those are all of the Arizona seats. Moving on, we have Arkansas. There's nothing in Arkansas. California. There's a decent bit up for grabs here. Now, this one could be a little interesting. The open seat here in California, third. That one, I'm going to tend to agree. Consensus, it will be a likely margin for Republicans. Now, California's ninth. I don't. It probably would be a likely in this, not likely a lean Democrat in this scenario. Josh Harder probably will win. Tom Petty, I don't think does. Another open seat. Now this one, California's 13th, right here. I could see this one getting decently close. I toss up would be a decently fair one. I think it could go either way. I think I'm gonna actually give it to John Duarte. I think he wins it, but ever so slightly. It would be very close. Now these are all Republican-held seats. Easily, I think Dan Valdeo wins that one in a tilt. Same with Mike Garcia. Young Kim, yeah, easily wins that. Again, national environment, something to consider. It'll be a Republican environment that will easily help most of the Republican candidates. We also have Ken Calvert. He wins that likely as well. I think lean for California's 45th. I think that is a fair assumption. And lean for Katie Porter in 47th. But in the 49th, I think Mike Levin only wins it in a tilt margin. No, he'll win it in a lean margin, but it'll be much closer. It is possible Republicans could potentially get that seat. And those are all the open seats for California. Moving on, we have Colorado. There are two open in Colorado. So this one, the open seat here in Colorado's 8th, I'll do that one first. I think Republicans actually win that in a tilt. And then Ed Perlmutter's seat, well, he's not running, but I don't think that really matters in Colorado's 7th, as you can see. I think in the end, Democrats win that in a lean margin, not a likely margin like the consensus would claim. Moving on, we also have Connecticut. There are two open in Connecticut. Both of these will go Democrat, I'd say, in both lean margins. Not much to talk about there. Delaware, nothing in Delaware. Florida, okay, there's a few in Florida here. So these, I'd say, are easily all Republican seats. You can even see, considering the environment in 2020, especially now, the national environment for a 2022 midterm, I'd say easily, I'd probably put Florida 7th as safe, and then the rest of these I would put as likely. The consensus is more or less accurate in this case for once. Florida is fast trending to the right. Again, the polls have Republicans fairly far up, especially in a state like Florida. They actually underestimate Republicans quite a bit. So I do see Republicans easily gaining there. Now, Georgia, there is only one, I believe, yes. Now, this one I think will be lean. Don't don't think Republicans get it, but it would be closer than it was in the 2020 election. Now we have nothing in Hawaii, Idaho, nothing in Idaho. In Illinois, there are a few ridiculous seats. These are, Democrats complain about gerrymandering, and then, you look at this crap. This is disgusting, and hopefully it actually blows up in their face. But we have Illinois 6th, probably a lean margin. I'd say I'd put likely for Illinois 11th. That seat is just ridiculous. Like, these are massively gerrymandered seats. Yes, there's gerrymandering on both sides, but then you see Illinois, which is by far the worst in the country. It's actually quite revolting. Now, Illinois' 13th, I don't think, realistically, this is potentially winnable for Republicans, but it is such a horrible seat. It makes no sense, but I think it'd be a tilt Democrat margin. It's just disgusting here. Makes no sense. Like, you can tell this is a gerrymander, and this is beyond anything Republicans have ever done. We also have Illinois 14th, probably lean, and then Illinois 17th. I'm actually going to say I think Republicans win that in a tilt margin. I think Esther King can win it. Despite how bad the gerrymander is, I think it's going to fail for them, at least in this one seat, hopefully. Now, moving on, we also have Indiana. There's one seat up in Indiana, and I do think Republicans actually win it in a tilt margin. Moving on from Indiana, we also have a couple of seats in Iowa. Now, these are all going to go Republican easily. I'd say likely for all three. I'd even potentially go as far as say safe potentially in Iowa 2nd, but even the consensus for the most part, Republicans will win all these seats. I just disagree that Cindy will be able to get even that close to Zach Nunn. I think the seat likely will go in a likely margin, actually. Now, moving on from Iowa, we have Kansas. There's one seat in Kansas, and I'm going to put that tilt Republican. Amanda Atkins will beat Sharice Davids, despite the victory of margin of victory in the 2020 election. It was only 4.5, and that was a Democrat year. I do think Republicans easily probably picked that one up, and I'd say by at least a few close points, maybe even. I think I'm going to actually put it lean. I think it'd be a 1 or 2 point margin for the Republican. And moving on, we have Kentucky. There's nothing in Kentucky. Louisiana, nothing in Louisiana. Maine, there is one in Maine. Now, this one, easily, it will be Republican. I think I'd probably put it, I'm going to put it likely. The margin itself is a 6.1 in 2020. Jared Golden will not win it despite being an incumbent, and the consensus is ridiculous on this one. So Maine's 2nd district easily goes for the Republican candidate in a likely margin. Moving on, we have Maryland. One seat in Maryland open. Probably a lean margin for the Democrat. I don't think Republicans can win it, unfortunately. Maine is a very left-wing state generally. So, despite polling trends and the environment, I still don't think that one's really in play for Republicans. Then there's Massachusetts. There's nothing there. Michigan, there are a few in Michigan. This one is an important state. The Rust Belt itself in general is very important right now, but very important state itself. This seat, Peter Meyer's seat, I completely disagree with the polling. Easily. I'm sorry, John Gibbs will win this. I'd say in a tilt, maybe even lean margin. Peter Meyer was primaried by John Gibbs, the more Trump candidate, Peter Meyer being the pathetic rhino. I do remember watching the primary itself easily. Peter Meyer will not hold any office again, hopefully. Now, Gibbs is a good candidate, and I don't think the Democrat can actually get it despite what some of these polls might say. I do think we win that seat fairly fairly tight. It will be very tight, but the state itself is also trending to the right. Michigan being an important Rust Belt state in the future for Republicans if they want to win elections, but I do think that seat would go Republican, as well as the rest of these. I think Michigan's 7th and 8th both go tilt, and then I'd say lean for Michigan's 10th. I do think Republicans will pick up every single open House seat there. Now, moving on from Michigan, we have Minnesota. There are 2 in Minnesota. Easily agreed that Brad Finstad wins it. I'd say by a safe margin, actually. And then this seat, Minnesota 2nd. I actually think it'll go tilt Republican for Tyler Kistner. Again, the national environment, something to consider. And Angela Craig is, I don't think she's the most popular candidate in the world. And even the consensus only has a tilt Democrat. So it is very close and winnable. And again, the consensus is not very accurate. Moving on, we also have Mississippi. There's nothing in Mississippi. Missouri, nothing in Missouri. Montana has 1 open. Honestly, I think it'll actually go safe. I think Montana's first goes safe, despite some information that would say otherwise. I do think it's safe. Moving on to Nebraska, we have the 2nd district in Nebraska. I think Don Bacon, incumbent, probably wins it in a lean margin. I think that's fairly accurate. Moving on from Nebraska, we also have Nevada. There are 3 open in Nevada. This is a state that is actually very much trending to the right now. It might be a little controversial for some of these picks that I'm going to make, but I'd say tilt for Nevada's 1st. I think it'll be tilt Republican for Nevada's 3rd, and Nevada's 4th. This one it's a little more open, but again, the state is trending to the right. I think Republicans actually picked this one up as well in a tilt margin. I think Sam Peters actually gets it from Stephen Horsford. I might be wrong on that. It is very possible I'm wrong. I'm a little more. It's a little harder for me to predict the Nevada ones. There's polls showing a little bit to both sides. I do think, again, with the state trending to the right, it is very possible. So we'll see. We have New Hampshire completely open. Now, I think Republicans pick up New Hampshire's 1st. New Hampshire's 2nd will stay in a lean margin for Ann Kuster. Moving on from New Hampshire, we have New Jersey. There are 3 open in New Jersey, as you can see. I think easily Republicans will take New Jersey's 7th in a lean margin, and then probably likely margin for New Jersey's 3rd and lean margin for New Jersey's 5th. Now we also have New Mexico. 2 open in New Mexico, 2 of the 3. New Mexico's 2nd, Yvette Herrell, Republican incumbency. Again, national environment. Yvette Herrell will win it, and I think in a lean margin, actually. And now New Mexico's 3rd. This one, unfortunately, I don't think Republicans can get it. At one point, I was considering potentially giving it to them, but I have to put it more in a lean Democrat margin at this point. It is still possible they could potentially make some gains here and pick it up, but right now I don't think it's possible. New York, there's a decent amount open in New York. We have Lee Zeldin's seat. Lee Zeldin running for governor, so he is not going to be running for the seat. But again, I do think the Republican candidate taking his place will win it. I also think that Andrew Garbarino's seat will, again, go in a Republican margin. I'd say likely is an accurate consensus. New York's 3rd, I'm actually going to put in a tilt margin. For the Democrat, I think it could get close, and I think Republicans potentially have a chance to take the seat. There's no chance that we get 4th. The 4th will probably stay in a likely margin. I would agree with that. New York's 11th will also go likely for the Republican. Now, we also have 17th. Lean would be accurate, I'd say. Lean as well for New York's 18th, but I think despite despite the special election there. Special elections always favor Democrats. New York's 19th, I think, will go tilt Republican by the midterms. There was a lot of there wasn't very high independent turnout, so that had an impact on New York 19th. And lastly, I think Republicans take New York's 22nd in a lean margin. We also have North Carolina. I will quickly go through there. I think, again, a tilt for Republicans in the first, probably likely for 6th, and I'd say lean for the 13th. Dakota has nothing. Ohio has a few. I think all of these go Republican. I'd say all in lean margins as well. Moving on from Ohio, we have Oklahoma. No, we do not. Oregon has 3 open. We have probably a likely in the 4th. In the 5th, I think Republicans actually could pick it up. It would be close, but I do think they could pick it up. And then the 6th will go in a lean margin for the Democrat. From Oregon, we have Pennsylvania. Fitzpatrick will win the seat. And I do agree with the consensus. I think this one will actually be lean. I think Republican can flip that seat as well. I think they flip this seat. And I think we actually flip this seat as well. I think Republicans will flip every single seat in Pennsylvania. Again, it is a trending to the right state, and Republicans are gaining a lot of steam in the Pennsylvania polling. Rhode Island, that one will, I'd say I'd go lean. I think it'll be lean for the Democrat. South Carolina has none. South Dakota, there are none. Tennessee has 1. Easily a safe. Texas has a few quickly, so we'll do those 3. The open seat, I agree with the consensus here. I think Texas 28. I think Republicans can get that in a tilt margin, and then unfortunately, I think likely margin for this seat. Although Mayra Flores won it, I don't think she can win it again. Maybe lean, but I don't think she wins it again this time, despite the trends in the south of the state. Moving on from Texas, we're almost done. We have Utah, nothing in Utah. Vermont, nothing in Vermont. Virginia has a couple. I think this here, Virginia's 2nd would go Republican in this case, but Virginia's 7th would probably stay lean. Almost done. We have a couple left. Washington has 2. Republicans will win. I think Joe Kent wins the 3rd. And then the last one here, Kim Schreier will probably beat Matt Larkin. I'd say in a lean, maybe even tilt margin. West Virginia has none. Wisconsin has 1. Republicans win that. I'd say likely, actually. That'll be another flip. And then Wyoming has none. So that is the final electoral map. This is my prediction for the 2022 House seats, which seats I think Republicans will flip and win, and which ones I think Democrats win. And overall, I think Republicans do easily pick up the majority, despite some of the polls coming out of the establishment poll. They're not going to be right. Most of them have been fairly inaccurate, and I do think this will be a Republican national environment where we take back both the Senate and the House. I think Republicans will end up getting 243 House seats. It could potentially be more if polling trends continue to favor Republicans going forward, but it is also possible they get a little less. Either way, Republicans will pick up the majority in the House, no matter what happens at this point. Anyways, if you agree with my prediction, please leave a like on this video. Let me know what you thought, and comment if you want to see me do anything similar to this in the future. Anyways, that's all for now. Hope you guys have a good night.